Very difficult to know how the jobs will look like in the future. And secondly, because this type of discussions are, in my opinion, a bit late. Why a bit late? Because the school was not prepared to take this direction seriously in the past. Now, if we talk about future, I think that the future is what already happened after IT and communications started to become utilities, and they burned several technological areas, which are industrial robotics, artificial intelligence, additive fabrication, and a very broad domain that is synthetic biology. Broad because it has applications in so many fields. We already start to know several of these fields. If we talk about robotic manufacturing, probably the first serious thing that happened into this area was when Midea Group decided to build its first robotic factory. This happened in 2014. They worked together with KUKA, which doesn't exist anymore because it was bought by Midea. And in this first factory, 800 robots replaced 24,000 people. But this was not just one company, one factory story. You can see here lots of similar stories. And maybe one of the most relevant is what Adidas decided to start in 2014. I will not go into details. If you wish, we can detail everything. What started to happen in Horeca with Kelly Burger that replaced the people turning the burgers with robotic systems, what already exists from Mole that is providing a very cheap chef that is cooking with the same gestures of a celebrity, and that may be replaced in a whole chain of restaurants at a price that is amazing because it's just £10,000, and that means the salary of a good cook for 4 or 5 months. So it is great to replace everywhere and to have uniformity of the level of the restaurants. It is already happened in agriculture, where vertical agriculture, it's a fact which use a lot of robots. There are robots for almost everything, from Magnum, which is a drone, a fleet of drones that works in field, in large areas, to robots that are for harvesting, which can harvest almost anything very successfully and at a very cheap, at a very low cost of labor. This is something that I think we should talk about, which is the impact of robotic manufacturing. If we talk about additive manufacturing, we talk about something that looks smaller because everything it's more linked to prototyping and to short series of products, but it had a huge success in constructions.
Okay.
There are already, here China is leading the game. They already have built a lot of buildings using additive manufacturing, which means way less jobs for humans. It is going into medicine, but this is not yet relevant for the jobs. In fashion, not yet relevant in jobs, but artificial intelligence is relevant. And if we just look at the two pictures, it's the same stock market in 63 and in 2016. And you can see the big change that happened. It happens in medicine where 2018 was the year when the first prescriptions were better than the ones provided by the doctors that were used to learn this system. It's Watson of IBM. It happens massively at the level of call centers. It was a successful experience in teaching using the same Watson machine. It is a successful deployment in Anfield, in the northern part of London, where it replaced the front office officers. And if we talk about synthetic biology, of course, CRISPR, things like this are important, but what is really important is, with big impact on jobs, is the cellular cell-grown meat, which is already on the way to become commercial either this year or next year at prices, because this is the problem, comparable with the ones of the conventional agriculture, with all the advantages that comes from being a clean meat. And here we can see what happened in 2018, when 1 million jobs were lost in China because of the moves that the sportswear industry did after Adidas' success. It was Nike, there were other companies that followed this trend. Probably one of the chances is to achieve this economical division between the big industry, the mass production industry and services that are for sure for the future is for robots and for artificial intelligence, and something that is around us related to the technological platforms for very small and temporary precise fixed jobs, like Uber is doing, like TaskRabbit is doing. For these types of jobs, it might be, maybe, this a solution. I'm afraid that Harari, that will be in Bucharest in 2 days from now, is right about what he wrote many years ago. We shall face the rise of the useless people class. This we can see in this uncoupling between production and the workforce that happened around 2000 in US, but it comes all over the world. And these are the solutions that some of the countries try to take. They were not going to somewhere. I think that the school is probably, it was a solution. It's not entirely lost, but we shall wake up the people and make the parents, make the professors, make the children to understand that we are still on a wrong course and we should change it. These are several ideas. Now the floor is open for anything that you would like to comment, to add, to tell about. First of all, I would like you to present yourself.
Hi, my name is David. I'm from Georgia, and I have 20 years experience in telecom field, working on different managerial positions in telecoms. And now, during the last several years, I'm focusing on education because I see a lot of challenges here, and I hope that me and my company and my work as an expert for international organizations will provide, I will provide some small input for the better future and for to like make the things a bit better than you just described.
Good afternoon. My name is Oana Craioveanu. I'm one of the co-founders and currently the CEO of Impact Hub Bucharest, which is a co-working space. We were the first co-working space in Bucharest, opening up 7 years ago, but on the other hand, we are part of an international network of 100 such, we like to say, collaborative workplaces that function around the world. My background is quite funny in the sense of, like, I used to be a banker, so I used to work on a trading floor similar to the one you put in the pictures. But 7 years ago, I decided I want to do something else. So I guess I can take myself as an example in terms of, like, how can you switch jobs completely? So I switched to how can we create a different type of organization and bring to Romania, and I guess it's the same in any CE country, this kind of concepts that we hear or we see in more developed markets, and to try to make it relevant to your community, right? Like, how can you make co-working spaces relevant for bringing innovation in the country? How can you encourage the young generation to become more entrepreneurial? How can you encourage collaboration across different sectors? Because it's not only about the entrepreneurs, it's about how do you bring together governments, students, entrepreneurs, scientists to try to tackle some of these, like, still big problems that we have, right, looking forward. So yeah, that's what I mainly do. I manage this co-working space, but I like to be part of, like, lots of, like, different communities that organize around how can we take collaborative action.
Hello, my name is Alexandru Harasim, and I represent UiPath Romania today. I'm from a more technology and technical perspective. UiPath, for those of you who don't know what we do, we are the leading provider of robotic process automation technology. And automation sits at the forefront of the fourth industrial revolution, as many say. And I'm here to talk to you today about some of the implications of automation, as well as, you know, how we can embrace that while keeping our job. From a background perspective, I'm an ex-banker myself as well. I switched to technology 3 years ago. And I'm looking forward to spend the time today with you. Thank you.
Hello, I am Mihail Cazacu. I am here because I work for the Chief Information Officer's Office in the government of Romania. My background is computer engineering and management consulting. I only joined public administration in 2016. And I am here because the issue of the automation, what it brings to productivity and to economic growth, and what, on the other hand, are the implications for the labor market, are an important topic for any government and also for this government.
Thank you. I think that we should start by asking a question to everybody in this room. So the question is that if it is somebody in this room that thinks that nothing relevant, dramatic will change in the next 10, 15 years if we talk about jobs. If yes, please raise your hand. Okay, this seems to be a good start. Now, let's see, and one of our colleagues said that he wishes to talk a bit about the impact of automation into this. Let's go a bit deeper into that for the beginning.
Sure. So let me start. I think I'm the colleague who wants to talk about automation. So there are different ways of automating, and Mr. Pambuccian spoke about industrial automation, so physical robots replacing people in factories. These have been around for several years now. We know of the impact in jobs as well as productivity. What I want to talk to you today about is more task automation, and basically software robots that are able to emulate humans on computers. And basically that is what our technology provides, a way of programming a robot to work on a computer, click everything, type into text box, interact with all the applications, email, everything on your behalf. Now this might sound a bit scary, but it will have a big impact going forward. And there are some independent studies that are trying to measure this impact. I will just mention 4 of them. So McKinsey says that 75% of the global productivity will be improved in the next 5 years through this sort of software automation. Also, the software robots will add an equivalent of 2.3 billion full-time employees at the global level, working alongside the humans. And 50% of the repetitive tasks, so the mundane work that every one of us does every day, will be automated through this technology. And last but not least, because this is a fear for everyone, okay, what happens to the jobs? If you have robots that will do the work that we are supposed to do, what happens to the number of overall jobs? And the World Economic Forum believes that actually net there will be 60 million additional jobs generated globally through automation. Because since we are making the parallel with the Industrial Revolution, let's take the instance the engine, when the engine was invented, right? So harvesting, which was one of the main tasks in agriculture, was automated entirely, and an engine replaced tens of people. However, engines created other jobs like servicing for engines, sales for engines, spare parts, research and development to make the engines better, and so on. So these are jobs that are generated on top of what was known before. And I think the future implies a lot of change. We don't know exactly what that change is going to look like, but we have some good ideas.
Yes.
Well, it is very true that from the historical perspective, every time manual work was automated, while on the short term there were losses of jobs, overall the economy, the economic benefits of increased productivity created the possibility to satisfy human needs at a much larger scale, which meant that pretty soon the new types of jobs were created, and the people who were, for instance, the workforce that became available in agriculture was the workforce that became available for industry. So the same engine that was making less people necessary in the field was powering the factories which needed more workers. So peasants became workers, and this happened also in Romania after the Second World War. So yes, this is true that indeed if we look at the past experience, there is the distinct possibility that this new wave of automation will create jobs, even though we are currently unable to accurately tell where exactly those new jobs will happen. So this is, let's say, this is the optimistic approach to automation, that somehow, somewhere, new jobs will be created. On the other hand, we also have some disturbing recent experience in many developed countries, United States, United Kingdom, Germany, where when classical industries collapsed somewhere, like mining and steel industry and shipbuilding and similar disappeared in parts of those very developed countries, they were not replaced. So those jobs were not replaced. Those areas remain underdeveloped and with rather high unemployment and with quite lower standard of living compared to the more prosperous parts of the country. So on one hand we have let's say 300 years perspective that somehow technology creates new jobs, but we also have, let's say, a 70-year perspective where fine details seem to be not that encouraging. In the same time, we and many of the participants in this seminar live in democracies, which is both good and bad. Good part is we live in a democracy. Interesting part is that because we live in a democracy, everybody can vote, including scared people. So we've had a presidential candidate in France who was suggesting that government should intervene by taxing companies who use robots to make it at least as expensive to use a robot than to use a human, therefore to actually discourage automation. Well, he didn't get voted, but the single fact that somebody thought that scare of automation could bring him or her votes, it was a he in this case, should be enough to get us wonder, especially if we associate this care with which areas in the United Kingdom voted for Brexit, and the vote for Brexit was heavy in those areas that suffered from the loss of industry and loss of jobs. So, what I'm saying is that any government, especially democratic governments, need to have to invest a lot of thinking in preparing their countries for the impact of automation, because as examples shown by Mr. Pambuccian, we can see that when a shoe factory replaces people with robots, those people don't go to work anywhere on short term. Yeah. So obviously the solution is not Mr. Mélenchon's proposal to tax robots, but something else needs to be done. So when robots replace people, there is something to do with those people, because otherwise those people vote.
Well, this idea of taxing robots actually was Bill Gates' idea. It is impossible to become reality because you cannot define what a robot is, where it starts, where it ends, what are you taxing there, because you are taxing twice the same thing. So no, this is an idea that is for sure not usable, and if somebody thought that this might work, I don't know. What I think that may help is indeed the cooperation between different professions. This might work. This may give something. And another thing that can help is coming from the human nature of the humans, because after all, everything that happens, it's for us. It's not for an idea or for something abstract or for, I don't know, for a tree. It's for humans. We produced these revolutions because we want things to be cheaper, to be more easier to achieve. So it's to be better than the ones that are provided by the classic manufacturing. So this is something, in essence, it's very good because it's providing cheaper things, more accessible and better things. And it was produced by us as consumers. Now, we can produce new needs for ourselves that can create new jobs. We can see where collaboration can drive us. And I would like to ask Oana to say some things about their experience, because Impact Hub is indeed a place of very good collaboration.
Just a quick question. How many of you have ever stepped in or worked in a co-working space? Okay. So everybody associates co-working these days with who's the big name that comes to your mind when you hear co-working? WeWork. WeWork, it's kind of like the Airbnb, right? It's the name right now. But co-working, it's not that. It's not this like big, fancy, huge valuation company. Co-working as a concept means getting together different types of people that try, on one hand, to adapt their workplace, and that's part of it. Like a co-working, it's part infrastructure, and I think that's why it's interesting, because co-workings are on one hand prototypes of the future workplaces, right? Something that 10 years ago seemed impossible, it's happening, meaning big corporates are allowing to their employees to work from different places, spaces outside of the company, right? So you don't feel that I need to supervise these guys and they need to work in these buildings, in these like allotted areas. Right now, everybody understands that the workforce is becoming mobile, right? And co-working is an infrastructure from this perspective to that. The communities that we build within co-working places are indeed an example of collaboration. Some of them are communities of members, so people that come and work from there daily. Some of them are like communities on different programs, projects, right? Like people that come together to solve a certain, right, issue and then they dissolve. It's pretty much, I was like really intrigued to discover how you set up the agenda of this event, like the entire collaboration process involved, right? It's pretty much about that. How can you bring different groups of people to give their mind, to speak their mind, and to input their expertise at different stages in a process, irrespective of what you're trying to solve? What we have witnessed, especially in Romania, I would say, I mean, most of my experience is here, but like being part of a global network, I can relate to the experiences of my colleagues in other countries, is indeed the importance, again, of spaces and emotions, right? We are humans. Our jobs are becoming more and more digital. I think everything that has to do with like the robots that UiPath is putting forward, we need that. It's not like something that is gonna make my life tougher, it should make my life easier. Instead of paying my accountant or waiting for my accountant for days to be able to put forward to me the balance sheet, they should be doing that way faster, right? Same thing goes for advertising agencies. And I'm just giving the examples from my perspective of a small entrepreneur, not even, I mean, from a government perspective or a big corporation, it's an even more different perspective.
I would ask a question here.
Yes.
Because you said you are talking about a physical space where people come and meet and work and so on. Why it's better a physical space than a virtual space? Because in a virtual space, we can meet without going somewhere. We can meet regardless where we are.
I think we need both, right? I think nowadays, and we've been trying that for years, we are still trying, and according to like, depending on the country or your job experience, maybe you've tried that, right? I used to work for HP, that was my technological experience. That was even before the bank. When I was working for HP, it was still unimaginable, like very new to the industry, to allow your employees to work anywhere outside of the company, right? So that was important to them at that point. Then they started creating all kinds of like collaboration tools, and we see collaboration tools and the importance of collaboration tools, both in like certain industries, but across, right? We need both physical spaces because we are humans, and we need the interaction. We see that every day at the hub. It's part of. It can't happen all physical, right? We live and we try to solve global issues, I think, right now. Even the people in this conference are not trying to solve an issue or try to gain knowledge on something that you're going to use just in your organization. You're trying to come up with ideas, you're trying to come up with contexts for things that are to be implemented across geographies. Across geographies means virtual spaces, means collaboration tools. We need that, and I think any industry or any big organization needs that. And it's again very interesting to see what are those collaboration tools that we can use, right? Like how inclusive are they? How, you know, again, we are sitting in SEE part partially, like some of the countries in this region are part of European Union, some are not. Right? It's again very different in terms of legislation when you talk about the privacy of these collaboration spaces. I think we need both. we've tried, I'll just give you a last perspective. We tried in the last couple of years to mix this kind of audiences. This spring we put together, for example, a second edition of a conference that tries to put together very diverse actors. We are trying to analyze the innovation ecosystem in Romania, just because Romania is last in the European scoreboard of innovation, right? When it comes to how much do we invest in R&D and lots of other things, but it's mostly about how much money do we invest in R&D. What can you expect in the future if at the country level you're not investing in R&D? Well, not a lot of like awesome things, obviously. But we put together this conference and we tried to bring, and we managed to bring together people that are otherwise never meeting. Like to put in the same conversations scientists with students, with companies, with governments, or public administration representatives. It's something that we do not have the exercise of doing in Romania and I guess across some other countries. We learned that, to give a very small example, Romania lags behind at the very simple things. Our students have still, kind of like my generation, or some of you in the room, they still have like zero exposure to working multidisciplinary, right? If you study law, you studied just law. If you study economics, you studied just economics. This is not happening in other countries. A future of work means people that are able to understand, right, and grasp different fields. We cannot operate in a world where computer science is just for the, computer science graduates. It's something that we can do. We can rely on the government or universities to do, but not only. This is something that the private actors can start doing. Like, how can you put students in experiences, right? In like, how can they work together in teams across fields? I'll stop.
Thank you for shifting into this direction, because to me it's very clear that we have to dramatically change the school. Unfortunately, it is probably the most difficult thing to be done, because there is a very strong DNA about the school coming, I don't know, from Generalschule-Regulament in 1763 in Germany, the first public system. But, and that is still, this school of the first industrial revolution, it was crystallized in the first industrial revolution, it's still what people have in mind. To it was added in the second industrial revolution the corporatism, in the way that the professors have scorecards and they are considered to be good or bad, which is very mechanic and wrong in my opinion. And these things are very strong in the cultural DNA of the societies, very strong. A change here is very difficult to be done. The experiments that were done, in my opinion, are stupid or ridiculous, and they will drive to nothing. And still, maybe in some very good private schools, they tried to, but they are extremely expensive. I'm not talking about Romania here, I'm talking about mostly US. They try to create a new way of understanding learning and school. This is a very serious problem. I was a believer in e-learning. Then I understood that that is just an electronic book. It's like in Harry Potter. You have the book and you have pictures moving there and nothing more than that. Changing the professors into what a human professor should be for this new age, it's very difficult. And I would like to start with David because he said something about schools and learning in electronic networks. But before that, who thinks that school is irrelevant for what is coming in terms of jobs? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You mean the today's school, or you mean that learning generally is irrelevant? Who thinks that learning is irrelevant for what is coming?
It's quite a provocative question, but
okay,
maybe.
Let's see.
Okay, we all agree that the changes are coming. No, they are here already. So the environment around us is also changing. I wanted to start with some statistics and some trends, but I will go on with education first. We see that today, today's employers, they have other requirements than it was like even 5 years ago. They are requesting different skill sets, soft skills or hard skills and so on. And current educational system, at least in the countries I'm familiar with, cannot provide the education that is like acceptable for the market. I mean. I mean, it's not it's on each stage of the education, starting with elementary and going to the graduates and postgraduate education. Actually, the trend is that employers need the employees right now and right here. They cannot wait for 6 years, for example, to get some kind of ambitious university graduate that doesn't want to work on the job that is actually appropriate for his skill set that he's got from the university. And the reality is that university doesn't give them the skills that they might use in the real life, right? So as long as we are expecting that new professions will emerge in the nearest years, for example, we already have good examples. For example, nobody have heard about some professions, and for example, the same Uber driver, right? For about 10 years ago, nobody would think about that. The technological advancements would cause like change in the profession of taxi driver, right? And he needs a bit different skills, for example. So I think that the role of the education system should be to provide the market with required skills and with professionals with required skill sets as soon as possible. And I think that big future would be, it's my personal opinion, with dual and work-based education.
Let me tell you something that I experienced.
Okay.
I had a discussion with several owners of software outsourcing companies, telling them that maybe it's a good idea because they have people that are not working continuously. They have people that for 2-3 months they have nothing to do. They keep them there because the competition is quite high, so the other company will not take them. But I said, okay, in these 2-3 months, try to drive them slowly toward artificial intelligence. It's quite close to what they are doing now in software development. The answer was this. They told me, Varujan, we already got back our investments several times. We invested heavily in real estate. When it will happen, I don't care what will happen with these guys. In front of them, they are talking very nice. They are saying that they are the best in the world. They will change the world. They do I don't know what. And that people thinks that that is the reality. The developers, I mean. But when they are telling the truth, they are thinking like that. And yes, everybody is interested when I'm hiring somebody to get the most of the money I can on the top of that. I don't care what will happen when other profession will come in the real world. And these are companies of hundreds to thousands employees, the companies I'm talking about.
But it's the keyword being outsourcing. The keyword being outsourcing, right? It's like owners of outsourcing.
Yes.
Which means
yes.
indeed they don't need to worry.
Yes, but the problem is that entrepreneurship culture, it's not very spread here. In Romania,
in our region, yes.
And in Eastern Europe, yes. The problem is that we still, after 30 years, lack the skills of marketing, maybe Poland less in marketing, but in marketing and in sales and in advertisement, we don't still have the skills. This part of the world, and Europe generally, not just Eastern Europe, is dominated by big entities. It's not that entrepreneurial as it's US, as it is Canada, as it is Australia, as it is UK. And this is a problem. We are talking about different types of proletarians. This is the reality. Okay. It is no more that working class that it was, that created communism, social democracy and fascism, but it's something quite similar in other work spaces. So this is also a problem of education. This is also a problem of education.
A different kind of education.
Yes, but if you are educating people to become workers, you will have workers and that's all.
This actually is a very interesting concept, and maybe I'll push the discussion a bit in a more philosophical area, but I think it's relevant. The concept of knowledge, and I will borrow an idea from Kjell Nordstrom, one of the authors of Funky Business, and he speaks about the two types of knowledge. One which is articulate knowledge, which is what, mathematics, physics, what pretty much you get from the university, which is, very clear, you study on it and then you get those skills. And actually this type of knowledge is becoming less and less relevant in our times, where you actually need to think about reskilling yourself for another job, upskilling yourself for another job. There's continuous change. I mean, mathematics might be good, in R&D and some specific areas, but it will not help you there forever. So there's a second type of knowledge, which is the implicit knowledge. And this is the ability to take your mathematics skills and apply them in completely different areas. And the question is, and any parent in this room will have this question: what should I do with my kids? Should they still go to university? Should I look at alternatives to that? How do I empower them to have this implicit knowledge up there as a skill? And the only answer we have today is through different ways of involving them with arts and other ways of expression, which are completely weird for someone who has who knows mathematics or physics. They don't really work very well with art. So actually transcending this paradigm is really important, and schools cannot do this by themselves. Companies cannot do this by themselves. They need to work together, because companies bring in the expertise, what's required, what does the industry need from a worker, whereas education and the schools, they provide that knowledge to the youngsters. So there's this importance of collaboration, and there's a lot of room for improvement there.
And another thing is that as the pace of changes will even accelerate even more, someone has to track the changes. What changes are to come in the nearest future, for example. What skills will be required, for example, in the next several years. Because students they don't have this information, and someone has to provide them not to happen this situation that they will not to be coping with situation when they have outdated skills already when they finish their education, for example. So
this is a very fragile area. We talk a lot about creativity. Yes, it's great creativity, but we shouldn't name almost nonsenses with that name. I remember Ken Robinson said once that creativity means the ability to create new things that have value. New things mean new things. Nobody else did that in the world. How many new things are? Very few. How many people we are calling creative? The most of the people. And that have value means that somebody will pay for that, will exchange that new thing on something, on another new thing, or on money, or on something. So this means creativity, new things that have value. And to create new things, I'm afraid that this is the way we are thinking. We cannot create something new, otherwise that combining things that we already know or that already exist. Try to imagine something that doesn't exist. If you try to do that, either you will combine things that already exist, or it's impossible to imagine it. So it's impossible to create new things that have value without knowing very well several things. I don't wish to go deeper into that, because I would attack immediately several educational systems that are already in several countries. But this is a reality. If you know nothing, combining nothing will create nothing.
Yes, I want to get back to this issue. I keep hearing that we need to prepare for the jobs of the future. The underlying assumption is we are able to tell the future. Now, if anything we are certified to be bad at is to predict the future. That's something we have, I don't know, 10,000 years of history that shows humans are not good at predicting the future. So why do we think we can be suddenly better, and we can guess that we will know what the future jobs are? Just make this mental exercise. Imagine we are now in 1880. How, with the level of technology of 1880, how could we know that electricity will become important? How could we know that the gasoline power engine will become important? All the high tech at that time was what? Steam engines, locomotives, steamships. That was the high tech of the time. How on earth could have those people guessed that in just 40 years there will be completely other technology, and how could they have prepared for that? No, it's not.
I will give a very short answer, then ask David to continue it. In 80s was invented the mobile telephony. It looks strange what I'm telling now, but the first mobile phone was done by David Hughes exactly in 80s. They knew nothing about electromagnetic waves other than the theoretical studies of all the not just theoretical, because there were experiments that drove to Maxwell equations, but let's say theoretical studies of Maxwell, and it was before Hertz. And that phone was functional. Unfortunately, he went to the Royal Academy in London, and they said that it's induction, and he went back home very sad. If you were American, he were going to the patent office, not to the academy, and he was trying to find out an investor, and we had the mobile telephony since the beginning of the 20th century. Yes?
So, I'm far from thinking that it is possible to predict the future like it did the old lady from neighboring country, for example. Anyways, I'm sure that it is possible to see the trends, and in order to make a response to these trends, it is important for all parties to work together. I mean, public, education, and the government, and the private sector. And in this case, everyone would know what should gonna happen with high level of accuracy. And if this cooperation will be in place and it will be effective, then a lot of energy and resources would be spared and will not be spent just and thrown to the wind.
I would go back to Oana and ask her, because she has the opportunity to see things happening in the front of her eyes. So can you give us some examples of creativity that can be achieved through this kind of cooperation of people coming from different areas and working together, or new ideas, fresh ideas that can come into place like that?
I just realized, I mean, I'm gonna touch upon that, but I just realized what we didn't reach in our conversation so far, what's happening, right? And like what I'm seeing, because yes, we are at the forefront and we get to see a lot of like these things, and sometimes we also need to take the time to reflect of like what's really happening. You've heard of gig economy, I'm sure, right? So gig economy, that came up, I think, initially about like 10 years ago, is this concept of like, instead of having full-time employees, why don't you break the job, right, that you want to, right, to tasks, and you get freelancers, or like you subcontract basically the work. And this is something that we are also seeing in our community, right? It's interesting because I need to attract clients, right? Like somebody needs to pay for my services it's a co-working, right? So we were aiming, and we try to target entrepreneurs, we try to target NGOs, and then we realized that there's a lot of like freelancers, right? Individually you call them freelancers, but the movement, it's gig economy, and that's getting big. Okay, it's getting big globally. In US, I was just checking, it's about 1/3 of the workforce already, okay, forecasted to be close to 40% by 2020, which is just next year. And in Romania, we can also see that happening, and I'm pretty sure it might be the same in other countries. And that's interesting because I think it's related to several things, right? It's not for, I mean, it's not for nothing that this started taking more and more space in the aftermath of the global financial crisis, right? The global financial crisis put a stop to a lot of jobs, like a lot of people were unemployed, but it also made, I think it also provoked some soul searching in individuals, right? So it's in the last 10 years that we started seeing more and more people asking, what can I do that I'm passionate about, but that can also create revenue for me? And this is what I'm seeing in the Impact Hub daily. We have a guy, we have a member that came up with his like crazy idea, like 7 years ago. It was a crazy idea. He likes to do, to be an explorer, right? Like, how can you live out of like traveling? It's as if somebody was to pay you to all the time travel and discover beautiful nature. How can you organize a business idea around that? It took him 7 years, but it is working right now. I mean, it's a lot of this kind of like jobs that you would not imagine that could happen. People are collaborating like that in the hub also, in the sense of like they set up new businesses, they set up new ventures where it's not in a classic traditional way, right? We set up this company, this is the equity, this is like, these are the employees. No, people trade time right now. This is how you, and this is like the gig economy also means I'm trading my time. Instead of working 8 hours per day full time for this organization, I'm working 2 hours for this organization, 3 hours for another, and sometimes it's not even about hours any longer, right? It's about like, what's the added value that you're offering to that organization?
And what you say sounds very similar to, and it happened, yes, in the software industry, it happened many years ago. We are talking about using technological platforms to create micro markets in which we trade time. And this is probably the access economy most important aspect. The problem is that access economy, it's blocked more and more in this part of the world. I mean Europe, when I say this part of the world, less Romania, less Eastern Europe, but more the Western Europe. And we have the experience with Uber, with Airbnb, with a lot of companies that are technological platforms and micro markets. I think that it's wrong. I think that it's wrong to replace education with regulations. I think that this is very wrong. I think that we should ease education to express itself through regulations and not to try to block it. And probably
fully agreed.
This might be a conclusion of what we talk about now, to be very careful with over-regulating areas that are now rising, that for sure are acceptable for the most of the people, and that sure can provide an income for what they know to do, and where the robots, artificial intelligence, these new types of agriculture are taking the jobs out. I think that this is a very important thing, to let these micro markets to proliferate, to help them, and to give the freedom to the people to use their skills to make a better living. What do you think about this? First, let's see if you think that it's a good idea or not. Who thinks that, yes? Yes.
Hi, my name is Susanne Herring. I'm a gig economy worker. 2 points. First, I didn't exactly understand what Mr. Pambuccian meant by replacing education with
regulation.
Regulation in relation to. the comments about the gig economy, and also in general to Ms. Oana and the entire panel. I mean, in Europe now, they're trying to, in certain countries, they're trying to regulate the gig economy and like giving the workers benefits and this and that. Like, what do you see? How does the near future look like? Because initially, as in most new things, it sounds very utopic to be, oh, I can work wherever I have my laptop and internet, but then you also end up not having any health insurance or any benefits, and you pay for your own internet and your hardware and all of that. So it's not just I'm giving my time, I'm also giving a lot of other things, and the employer is not paying for that, and they don't even care about that. So how do you see this evolving?
I don't have an answer, but it's exactly that kind of conversation that I think needs all the people in the room, right? In order to be able to see that, yes, I mean, the government is one, right? And it's like governments need to understand the importance of this. It's like how many people are starting to make a living in my country, in my county, in my municipality out of this kind of jobs, okay? This is number one. I think in Romania, they're not even aware to like the extent of this, okay? Second is like, how can they keep flexible and try to create, I mean, you cannot say no regulations, okay? You can say, try to come up with like flexible regulations.
Or we can say self-regulations, and
it needs to be clear who's paying the...
set of regulation it's not good, will die because the market will not go in that direction. After all, it's Adam Smith here.
Well, no.
They can't self-regulate. Somebody needs to say who's paying the taxes, what are the benefits that I'm getting, right? It's like there needs to be, otherwise you're again fleeing one market and going to another, right? Like I can still very well be, we have that at the hub. We have Romanian guys working just for like international clients. Nobody in Romania affords to pay them, for example. That's very skilled people, but...
So, first, remember that I said that what we are not good at is to predict the future. However, nevertheless, we managed to survive those many years without being able to predict the future. And if we take a deep look, and I will get to your question through this trajectory, if we get a good look at it, how do we cope with the uncertainties of the future? We build resilience in our own systems. So that's why we have societies where people help each other. That's why we make savings. We do not spend everything we have now. We keep some from the time we will need those resources, and so on and so forth. So the only way to cope with the uncertainties of the future is to build systems that are resilient to, let's say, generically, whatever changes may come. Now, those platforms that trade gigs, so these gig trading platforms, are another way of building resilience for the employers of the gigs. They do not have to commit themselves to keep that person hired because they don't know if the future will require that person to continue to be hired. So for them, it is convenient to have such a platform where they can pick the person for a short time and then drop the person, and then it's that person's problem what to do till the next gig, which brings to the situation that right now those gig trading platforms are one-sided. They benefit apparently in an unbalanced way the ones who employ the gig workers and not necessarily the workers themselves. So if we want to have a resilient system, this system needs to be balanced. Otherwise, remember what I said earlier, in democracies, unsatisfied people vote, and sometimes they can scare politicians into, guess what I'm going to vote for if you do not forbid Uber? Guess what I would vote for if you do not forbid Airbnb? And so on and so forth. And we end up with what Mr. Pambuccian said, that at least in the Western countries, but even I work in the palace of the government, and in the last half a year, I had in front of the palace, we have many demonstrations, but I have two protests of the taxi drivers who wanted the government to forbid Uber. Yeah? So, getting back to your question, it's great we have those platforms where you can have micro jobs or gigs or whatever you want to, but we need to build a full systems around them, including a way to allow a fair share of the added value created by the gig workers. Some of this has to return in the shape of benefits, health insurance, and so on for the gig worker. Until we have those, we will also have protests and politicians blocking the existence of these platforms.
Yeah, wait. And you are right. But if you are talking about the benefits for the gig workers and the protest of the no gig workers. So
yeah,
there is no link between these two. Yes,
oh, yes,
for the gig workers it's good to have all these benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And be sure that they have, generally speaking, they have that.
We just heard they don't.
That other side of the coin are the social big vectors that are usually represented by the trade unions, and that are a reminiscence of the first industrial revolution. Yes, they are quite strong yet. Yes, politicians take them into consideration. Yes, because they have their part in elections, but they try to preserve things as they are, because they succeeded to get what was good for them in that moment, and they try to preserve the things as they are. We had a great writer here in Romania that experienced, it lived before the Second World War. It was a communist initially. It experienced the communism in Russia, and after that he became a strong anti-communist, and he used to say that any form of organization serves just the organizers. That's why I strongly believe in less organized things, to serve less the organizers. Okay. Yes?
Can I?
Panaitis Strati was his name.
Okay, thank you. I will try to make very brief, and it's a fascinating panel. And it's actually a pity that there is no representative of the labor on the panel, which I think will have an interesting view. I agree, we are not very good in foreseeing the future. But I think the worst thing will be not understanding the present. And understanding the present means to me that we are in a situation that is very grim. And if you have to look, and if you look at it in a more comprehensive, and you look at the data, you mentioned Uber. Uber is going to be having an IPO probably next week. They speak about 90 billion of capitalization for a company that in 10 years, since it was founded, it never turned a profit. But it loses 4 billion per trimester. And we never had such an experience like that in our economy, in our histories. And that, to me, it doesn't look normal. And to many people, it doesn't look normal. And if you look at what's happening in the so-called gig economy, and you look at what's happening on the protest in France or the Brexit, without understanding what is the impact of that, I think we will walk into a future which is even worse. You all spoke about education, and I agree, and there was a panel today earlier about misinformation and how important it is to have informed citizens. But education costs. And when, by average, in Europe, we spend 5 to 7% of GDP in education, where do we take this money? The beloved Uber or the amazing Amazon is paying or not paying their taxes that we can use to prepare the future leaders. And we are allowing them to do that, thinking that they bring the gig economy. They are not. There was a study done in the US. They compared a large retail store called Sears, and then, which basically was the Amazon of the up to the 80s, 90s, and Amazon. And they compared the situation of a Sears worker and an Amazon worker. And there was no more, let's say, blunt example of the situation that we have. We have an Amazon worker which is working poor, which cannot afford nothing. There is a Sears worker that was able to buy a home by just working as a Sears worker. And it's weird that I feel so much left in a country that used to be a communist country, but I can tell that there is this lack of looking holistically at what's happening and thinking that, almost a faith that innovation and evolution is, by default, is good and will bring us its own solution. And probably we are opening up our eyes. I don't think how good we are to see everything clearly. But if I just look into the automation of the future, when you say, there was this question, thinking, do we need education? Maybe we don't need even education. There was a presentation last night from the new application that Google will develop, where they will put artificial intelligence in your mobile phone. They were able to reduce it to 1 gigabyte, and your mobile phone will basically understand from what you put there that you are traveling to Paris, and maybe you will need a car, and maybe you will need to book a restaurant. They will do that for you. So the power of artificial intelligence, the distribution of who has those resources is so unbalanced that I fear that our own democracies and societies that were built around a certain model of distribution of income and representation has been completely disrupted, and we still think that we can, in a way, address that and welcome what is coming. And I feel that the more I grow up, I turn into a Luddite, but I'm not sure which is the solution, but I think that not realizing the threats of those trends, it really puts us in a very difficult situation. So, sorry for taking so much, but I felt it. Thank you.
I would say something different. The cellular ground meat was patented by a man that lived in the Netherlands. It was Van Ellen, his name, Willem Van Ellen. It got subsidies from the Dutch government to develop it. And in 1999, and after 10 years, the government considered that there is no value into that and stopped the financing. And who pushed the money there was Sergey Brin from Google. KUKA was the biggest company that had the knowledge of designing robotic factories and producing the robots for it. And when Midea put on the money of the investors 4.8 billion euros. No country from Europe, not even the European Union, came with a counter-offer to keep that knowledge here. And then we are wondering why everything is going out and why we have just to pay for things that other people do. Maybe we should add the already chronic lack of vision here. And when you don't have vision and you don't understand where things will go, then you will wonder when they are coming cheaper than what you can provide, and you are trying through regulations to keep it more expensive. Is this for the good of the people? I don't think so. Yes.
Okay, so actually I have one question from Tamar. She couldn't actually talk. She had an issue with her voice, which actually could be also replaced by robots, right? You could just write the message.
No, this is unfortunately another very wrong thing. By the way, artificial intelligence, it's not about intelligence. Maybe it will go for that, but as I can foresee now, just in mixed structures, biological and hardware, and that is not yet, it's very far. For the moment, artificial intelligence is about pattern recognition and searching in big data, and that's all.
Yes, yes. I'm just talking about speech recognition. So you can just write a letter and you can just say it down.
Okay, yes.
Anyway, I'm Tamar Abzianidze. I don't know, did I say it right? From Georgia, and it's an honor for me to appear before you today. First, thank you for the interesting presentations, and thank you to the organizing team for the opportunity to cover these significant issues. It's AI revolution, automation revolution, and as a result, for instance, taxi drivers, doctors, and others will lose jobs because it's new brave of new world. And I have a question related to a psychological issue. Do we as human beings have mental balance and emotional balance? And how can we improve our skills to keep learning throughout our lives? And what kind of policies should government implement to overcome these challenges? And because nobody knows what it will be, for example, in 2040, will there be the ability to keep changing and learning and reinventing, which is the most essential part for living? And if I can follow up with my own question, I would say actually that I think it's important also, as it was mentioned, to see the present. Like, are we really ready for this new change? I mean, we are never ready for the new because the new is new.
It doesn't matter, it's happening anyway.
Yes, of course. But for instance, we know that the trucks will be replaced for the companies for better efficiency by self-driving trucks. And actually in US there are more than 2 million drivers in trucks. So my question is, like, how can we prepare those people who actually can be in their 40s or maybe even more, or maybe near in their like elderly age? Are those people prepared to learn something new? Are we really preparing them to do something else? Like, do they feel confident in this change? And what are we doing with those people? Because, as we said, we lack education, we lack those platforms, and even the young generation feels a bit unsafe into those new jobs. Because, for instance, in my case, I'm studying computer science, and I just thought it as being the fancy new thing, seeing how you can invent things. But actually, now that I'm seeing deeply into that, there are way more things just from computer science. You can be a system automator, you can go into AI, you can go into just programming, and the thing is going wider and wider every day with new platforms. So how can we prepare those people, and how can we attract people to go into automation, because we know it's the future. It's going to be replacing all those other jobs. Like,
I would add to that the life extension,
okay, yeah,
which is also something.
Aging population.
Who wishes to answer to these questions?
I can take up a piece, and it's like connect a bit through the comments. To get back a bit to this, like the side of the people in the gig economy. I disagree. Let's not put equal between Uber and gig economy. Gig economy, it's way bigger than what Uber happens. Uber is a new thing, right? I don't think it's normal as a business person. I don't think it's normal what's happening to have such a huge valuation and produce zero.
Yeah, not
exactly. But that's a different conversation. Like, let's stick with the gig economy. I think gig economy is partly, I mean, it's not only to benefit the employer. It didn't start from the employer only. It also starts from the contractors, from the freelancers, right? It starts, and this has to do with the new generation especially. It's about people that are looking for flexibility. It's about people that are looking for purpose in a different way. It's not only about me as an employer that I don't want to hire somebody, right? That's what I heard Mihail saying. Like, maybe it's about the bad employers that don't want to keep like the employees. No, it's the other way around. It's like I can't find those people any longer, so I might have to start working. And actually, why not? It's talking about creativity. It's going to be way more creative if I work with two or three freelancers throughout the year on a certain job that otherwise would have been done by one of my employees. What I'm saying is, like, it's not something that anyone controls. It's a market. It's supply and demand. I think it was in a World Economic Forum study that revealed that the new generation, like the millennials and I think it was about Generation Z, they expect to have 15 jobs, right? If they were asked, how many jobs do you envision you're going to hold throughout your life? 15 jobs. This is the answer, the average that they gave, right? So I need to adapt to that as a government, as an employer, I mean, talking about this generation, right? The new one, the young ones. Talking about the older generations, like the seniors, I think it's a lot of truck drivers. As far as I know, like the last news I read was that Germany is hiring Filipinos, right? This is the extent to which they mistrust the truck drivers. So it's a lot of traditional jobs in which we do not have the people, even the seniors, right? So I think we are just adapting, and things are going to adapt, and maybe that's the reason why the industry is developing that. Right? So what I'm saying, don't try to look at it from just like one perspective. It's like all the time moving. It's like from everyone's perspective. We are all of us trying to adapt to what we know and are able to grasp. We can't foresee the future. We just know that we need to adapt for now and try to envision a better scenario. It's not bad or wrong. It's just that we're trying to envision a scenario of a future that works for all, though we have no idea what a future that works for all means.
Yeah, well, so just to be very clear, using, from the point of view of a company, using gig workers is a way of hedging against the unpredictable future of the company, and so it's not good or bad. What not starts to be bad is when the relation gets one-sided. Because let's be clear about the very fundamental issue in economy is not that economy is driven by offer and demand. Before offer and demand, there is human needs and human activity. That's what creates value. That's what creates what can be offered and what can be demanded. So, if at the start of the year, this is here is the level of all the wealth, all the goods existing, and all the resources existing in a society. It's at this level, at the level of my armrest. Through the activity of the humans, gigs, company owners, company managers, and so on, at the end of the year, this value was augmented to this. Yeah? this is all from here to the bottom. This is the total of the resources that society has as a protection against the unpredictable. There is not more. There is nothing above it. That's all. Yeah? Okay, so the only question, and this makes a society resilient or fragile, is how this resource gets to be employed when things go very bad. And the purpose of any organized society, which means a state with a government, is to make sure that when something goes terribly wrong, most of the people belonging to that community survive. Yeah? So, the question is, how do we ensure this survival? We have a huge state that can take care of everybody, or, to a certain extent, people take care of themselves on condition they have enough, reasonably enough resources to take care of themselves. So, it is also always important in a society to be resilient that the wealth accumulated in that society is well distributed. Because if it's not well distributed, those who don't have, when shit happens, will be dead. So that's why I was saying, if we want to build resilience for the future, we need to build this flexibility that technology allows us. It's legitimate for a company to want to have a flexible workforce. But we also need to ensure that the profit of the value generated by the activity of that company employing those short-term workers is well distributed between the owners of the company and the workers.
Frankly speaking, I don't care if Uber will go bankruptcy tomorrow, or if, I don't know, if Amazon will go bankruptcy, as long as another company will always replace that niche. It doesn't matter.
Can I give a concrete
It
example?
really
of what
doesn't matter. No, because it's too long, this thing that you talk about, and I can see it in the room. It was a question there.
Not only a question. So I'm Dusan Stojcevic. I'm working for Grenci, which is ICANN accredited registrar. So I'm trying to get this philosophical story down to earth. So basically, domain names. This is a market. You cannot hold domain name. It's not something that you can raise or something you can touch. But from let's say 20 years ago, we have developed automated processes for registering. Everything is automated. So my company is practicing automation for 10 years. My company is not big, but we have several offices around the world. Yes, we use collaboration tool for 10 years or more. So one simpler remark, so for everybody, we are from Southeastern Europe. Our co-working space was and still is the restaurant or coffee shop. This is where the business is up until today, and in the future will be done. So this is this is a fancy word or fancy term for something that we initially are doing in this area for a long time. Back to domain names. There is no automation. I'm speaking with 10 years history of my company. There is no automation without humans. So you need workers. automation brings jobs, because automation cannot replace human. So a human is needed. So it's a fear of losing job. It's the level of knowledge that you need to get is different. Previously, you will do everything by hand. Now, everything is automated, and you need a different kind of knowledge. This kind of knowledge you cannot get from university. You cannot get from usual education. So you need to be aware that learning process is always continuously. So you cannot build, and one short remark, and I will finish, for the governments. In Serbia, IT industry is hoping that government leave us alone. Don't regulate anything. We will solve everything. That's my message for the governments.
There is one more question there, yes, and probably this will be all because we are out of time. But Sorina told me that there is something that will keep us here more, not in the room. But I don't know. She knows what's about, and she will make the announcement. Yes.
Yeah, I have one more question. Actually, to kind of elaborate on what the colleague said previously. So, with more automatization, it's also about the change of productivity, and in some ways productivity access in some regions. But we're actually talking about like a two-speed development, because some countries or some regions are very much ahead of others. So I'm just curious how this shift in productivity can actually benefit those lagging behind. I'm talking about regions and countries, and how it can actually contribute to the SDGs.
I will give you a politician answer here, because I am a politician. I think that these times when we kept talking about two speeds of development, they passed. Because now the economy, it's really global. If something is cheaper here, it will be cheaper here and everywhere. If something is more expensive here, it will be more expensive here and everywhere. The problem is not in terms of consumers. For the consumers, it will be probably in 10 years from now quite the same everywhere. The problem is that it was this period of time when humanity shifted from human created products to the robots created products. For that times, people in China, people in Romania, they were cheaper as workers than people in Germany or in France. And okay, it was a shift that we saw. Now they are more expensive than robots, and we shall see the final shifts, because after all, a robot costs the same everywhere in the world. The problem will no more be a problem of who is providing the workforce, but who is providing the better way to organize, the better way to advertise, the better way to sell. We were talking about Uber. We have 5 Uber-like companies in Romania. 5, not 1, 5. One of them is Romanian, it's doing very well. They were a company that worked Clever Taxi. They worked for giving the orders to the taxi, to the classic taxi companies. And when Uber came, they saw the opportunity and they shifted to a technological platform like that. It was easy to them to do that. And they are thriving now. It's very good. So this is not a matter of anything else than vision. who has the vision will thrive, and who has the money will thrive, because Boston became the most important place in the world, because there is a huge tradition. Massachusetts was the second country in the world that had a public learning system, but also they succeeded to transform learning in a huge business. And look at Harvard and at MIT, they are very strong businesses. So where the vision and the money are, things will go better than where the vision and the money lack. That's all. And I don't think that we shall talk in terms of countries anymore, but in terms of regions and of communities more. Probably this thing of that country is better than the other one in terms of I don't know what, will start to be less relevant than this region, this city, this community is better than the other one in doing that or that. That's all. It's after all, everything it's related to the end user. Everything is related to our desire to have cheaper, better, and easier to achieve objects and services. It's everything, it's around us. It spins around us as humans. It's not something pro or against human, or it's totally moral agnostic, and it's related to the needs that we have and how much we can fulfill them in exchange of what we can give for them. That's all.
I heard SDGs, and I never can help myself when I hear SDGs. So on Sustainable Development Goals, I think that's the thing that's still going to keep us all busy, right? It doesn't mean, I mean, it does, the fact that some countries are more developed, and in some countries there's a lot of innovation and like good salaries and good employment, that doesn't mean we solved it for all. There are still so many other parts of the world, right, where we need to bring the innovation, we need to bring the solutions, we need to scale some solutions, or we need to adapt a lot of solutions. I don't think, I mean, part of the need of humankind is definitely to produce food, clothes, transport, everything that we take for granted. But it's not only that, right? I mean, we evolved, apparently, or we like to think in that way. In some areas. But on the other hand, in the process of creating, of production, we are also producing all these like negative effects, right? So I don't agree that the end aim is just to produce more, cheaper, because it's also about, it's basically about the impact, right? And to me, what I hear when I think of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, we talk very little about the impact that we have on the planet. I'm not like a huge activist for climate change and that. I'm just saying that in the process, because it's not like everything, it's not something that I care about daily, it's not something that I work focused for, but I think we need to mind that in the process of trying to develop and provide for more to the humans and like members of the societies, there's a lot of, yeah, economists call it externalities, but it's a lot of bad things that we create, and I think that's also going to keep us occupied, you know, I mean, to try to think of it in a positive way. While we live to create this value added, we also create problems. So I think that's also going to create jobs, like how can we solve the problems while we try to create profits and...
Okay, I think that Sorina will kill me. Fortunately, she cannot. Thank you very much. It's very good to have a diversity of opinions. That is very important because evolution is based on diversity. I hope to meet each other next year as well. I would like to thank to the organizers for this wonderful session, and to our panelists and to our participants for this afternoon. Thank you.